I'm so excited to talk with you today about something that can completely change your English learning journey. I get messages from English learners all the time saying things like, I've been studying English for years, but I still don't feel confident speaking. Or, I understand everything when I read, but when someone talks to me, my mind goes blank. Does this sound familiar? Well, I have some really good news for you today. You don't need to spend hours and hours every day struggling with English. Just 30 minutes a day, used in the right way, can make a huge difference in your fluency. Let me start by telling you a little story. A few years ago, I met a woman named Maria at a coffee shop. She had been living in the United States for 3 years, but she was still very shy about speaking English. She told me that she studied grammar books for hours every night. She watched English movies with subtitles, and she even took online classes twice a week. But when it came time to order her coffee or talk to her coworkers, she felt frozen. Her English was actually quite good, but she had no confidence. So I asked her, Maria, when you study English at home, do you ever actually speak out loud? She looked surprised and said, Well, no. I read and I write, but I don't really speak because there's nobody to talk to. That's when I realized what was missing. Maria was putting in the time, maybe even more than 30 minutes a day, but she wasn't practicing the right things. She was learning about English instead of learning to use English. This is where the magic of 30 focused minutes comes in. It's not about studying longer, it's about studying smarter. When I say 30 minutes can change your English, I mean 30 minutes of active, purposeful practice that focuses on the skills you actually need to use English in real life. Speaking, listening to real conversations, and thinking in English. Not just memorizing grammar rules or vocabulary lists. Now, let me break down what these 30 minutes should look like. I like to think of it as 3 parts, each taking about 10 minutes. The first 10 minutes should be for warming up your brain and your mouth. Yes, your mouth. English uses different mouth movements than your native language, and just like an athlete warms up before exercise, you need to warm up your English muscles. Start your first 10 minutes by reading something out loud. It could be a news article, a page from a book, or even the captions under a YouTube video. But here's the key. Don't just read the words. Pay attention to how they feel in your mouth. Notice where your tongue goes when you make the TH sound, or how your lips move when you say words with W sounds. Read slowly at first, then try to read with more emotion and expression. Pretend you're telling a story to a friend. While you're reading, don't worry if you don't understand every single word. This isn't a vocabulary lesson right now. This is about getting comfortable with the rhythm and melody of English. Every language has its own music, and English has a very specific rhythm. When you read out loud every day, you start to feel this rhythm in your body, not just understand it in your mind. After reading for about 5 minutes, spend the next 5 minutes repeating what you just read. But this time, close your eyes and try to say some of the sentences from memory. Don't worry about getting every word perfect. Focus on copying the rhythm and the feeling of the sentences. This is called shadowing, and it's one of the most powerful techniques for developing fluency. Now, let's talk about the second 10 minutes. This is where we focus on listening, but not the kind of listening you might expect. Forget about trying to understand every single word. Instead, I want you to listen like you're learning a song. Have you ever learned a song in a language you don't speak? You probably didn't understand all the words at first, but you could follow the melody, and eventually you started to pick up phrases. For these 10 minutes, find something to listen to that's just a little bit above your current level. It could be a podcast, a YouTube video, or even a TV show. But here's the important part. Listen to the same piece of content for the entire 10 minutes. Yes, the same thing. Play it, then play it again, and maybe even again. The first time you listen, just let the sounds wash over you. Don't try to translate everything in your head. Just listen to the flow of the conversation, the emotions in the voices, the places where people pause or speak faster. The second time you listen, try to catch individual words and phrases. Don't worry about understanding the full meaning yet. The third time, if you have time, try to focus on the connecting words like and, but, because. These little words are super important for understanding how English speakers connect their ideas. I know this might sound strange at first. You might think, why would I listen to the same thing 3 times? Isn't that boring? But here's what happens in your brain when you do this. The first time, your brain is just trying to make sense of all the sounds. The second time, it starts to recognize patterns. The third time, it begins to predict what comes next. This prediction skill is exactly what you need for real conversations. Think about it this way. When you have a conversation with someone, you're not just understanding the words they're saying right now. Your brain is also predicting what they might say next based on the context and the patterns you've learned. This is how native speakers can finish each other's sentences or know what someone means even when they don't finish their thought. Now we come to the third and most important 10 minutes. This is speaking time. But I'm not talking about speaking to yourself in the mirror, although that's not bad either. I'm talking about active speaking practice where you're creating your own thoughts and expressing them in English. Here's what I want you to do. Take the topic of whatever you just listened to in your second 10 minutes and talk about it. Out loud. Pretend you're explaining it to a friend who wasn't there, or pretend you're telling your family about it at dinner. Use your own words, your own opinions, your own examples. Let's say you listen to a short podcast about coffee culture in different countries. Now you talk about coffee culture in your country. How do people in your country drink coffee? When do they drink it? Do they drink it alone or with friends? What's different about coffee culture in your country compared to what you heard in the podcast? The magic happens when you connect new English input with your own experiences and thoughts. You're not just repeating what you heard, you're creating something new. This is real language use. This is how you build fluency. But here's where many people get stuck. They start talking, and then they don't know what to say, or they make a mistake and they stop. Let me give you some strategies for keeping the conversation going, even when you're talking to yourself. First, don't stop when you make a mistake. In real conversations, native speakers make mistakes too. We say and we forget words, we start sentences and then change our minds. That's normal. If you forget a word, describe it instead. If you can't remember the word refrigerator, say the big cold box in the kitchen where we keep food. Native speakers do this too when they can't remember a word. Second, ask yourself questions to keep talking. Why do I think that? What's an example of this? How is this different from yesterday or last year? What would happen if this changed? These questions will help you keep the conversation flowing and give you practice with different types of English structures. Third, give yourself permission to change topics. If you run out of things to say about coffee, start talking about breakfast or morning routines or your favorite cafe. In real conversations, topics naturally flow from one to another. Practice making these transitions by using phrases like "that reminds me of," or "speaking of food," or "this is similar to something that happened to me." Now, I know some of you might be thinking, but I don't have anyone to practice with. How can I improve my conversation skills if I'm always talking to myself? This is a great question, and I understand the challenge. But let me tell you something important. Some of the most fluent English speakers I know spent a lot of time talking to themselves when they were learning. When you practice speaking alone, you're building two crucial skills. First, you're training your mouth and your brain to work together quickly. You're building what we call automaticity, which means your mouth can produce English sounds while your brain is thinking about what to say next. Second, you're building confidence. When you practice expressing your thoughts in English regularly, even to yourself, you start to trust that you can communicate your ideas. But here's a secret that will make your solo practice even more effective. Record yourself sometimes. I know, nobody likes the sound of their own voice. But recording yourself is like having a practice conversation partner who never judges you and is always available. Once a week, maybe on Sundays, record yourself talking about your week for 5 or 10 minutes. Talk about what you did, what you learned, what made you happy or frustrated, and what you're planning for next week. Then, a day or two later, listen to your recording. Don't focus on all the mistakes. Instead, listen for the improvements. Notice where your pronunciation is clear, where you used a new word successfully, and where you connected your ideas smoothly. Keep these recordings, and after a month, go back and listen to your first one. You'll be amazed at how much you've improved. This is one of the best motivational tools I know. Progress in language learning can feel slow day by day, but when you compare yourself to a month ago, the improvements are usually much more obvious. Let me address another concern I hear often. 30 minutes sounds good, but I'm so busy. How can I fit this into my schedule? I totally understand. Modern life is crazy busy. But here's the beautiful thing about this 30-minute method. It's flexible. You don't have to do all 30 minutes at once. Maybe you do 10 minutes of reading out loud while you're having your morning coffee. Then you listen to the same podcast episode during your lunch break and again while you're cooking dinner. Then you spend 10 minutes talking about your day while you're getting ready for bed. The time adds up, and your brain gets multiple exposures to English throughout the day, which is actually more effective than one long session. You can even break it down further. 5 minutes of reading while you wait for the bus. 5 minutes of shadowing while you walk to work. 10 minutes of listening while you do household chores. The key is consistency, not perfection. 30 minutes total throughout the day, every day, will give you much better results than 3 hours once a week. Now let's talk about what types of materials you should use for this practice. This is really important because the wrong materials can make your practice much less effective. For your reading and shadowing practice, choose materials that are slightly below your current level. You want to be able to understand most of what you're reading so you can focus on pronunciation and rhythm rather than struggling with meaning. Good sources for reading practice include news websites written for general audiences, blog posts about topics you're interested in, short stories, or even social media posts by native speakers. Avoid academic papers or technical documents unless that's specifically the type of English you need for work or school. For listening practice, choose materials that are at or slightly above your current level. Podcasts are fantastic because they use natural, conversational English. YouTube videos where people are talking naturally, not reading scripts, are also excellent. TV shows and movies can work too, but be careful not to choose shows with too much slang or very fast dialogue, unless you're already at an advanced level. Here's a pro tip for choosing listening materials. Look for content where you already know something about the topic. If you're interested in cooking, listen to cooking shows or food podcasts. If you love sports, find sports commentary or interviews with athletes. When you already understand the context, it's much easier to follow the language. For your speaking practice, the topics can come from anywhere. Talk about your daily experiences, your opinions on what you read or listened to, your plans and dreams, your memories, your culture, your work or studies. The goal is to use English to express your real thoughts, not to repeat memorized phrases. Let me share another story with you. I have a student named Carlos who was really struggling with confidence in English. He had studied grammar for years, and his written English was quite good, but he barely spoke. I convinced him to try this 30-minute method, but he was skeptical. He said, "I've tried speaking practice before, and I always get frustrated because I don't know what to say." So we started small. For the first week, I asked him to just describe his lunch every day. Just his lunch. What he ate, where he ate it, who he ate with, how it tasted. He thought it was silly, but he agreed to try. Every day for a week, Carlos spent 5 minutes talking about his lunch. By the end of the week, something interesting happened. He started naturally expanding his descriptions. He began comparing today's lunch to yesterday's lunch. He started talking about lunch customs in his country versus lunch customs in America. He began sharing memories of special meals with his family. What started as a simple description became a rich, complex conversation with himself. After a month of this practice, Carlos told me, "I finally understand what you meant. I'm not just practicing English words anymore. I'm practicing English thinking." That's exactly right. Fluency isn't about knowing all the words. It's about being able to think and express yourself naturally in the language. This brings me to another important point. Many English learners get too worried about making mistakes. They think that making mistakes means they're failing. But actually, mistakes are a sign that you're pushing yourself to try new things. If you never make mistakes, it probably means you're staying in your comfort zone and not growing. When you're doing your 30 minutes of practice each day, give yourself permission to make mistakes. In fact, I want you to make mistakes. Try to use new words even if you're not sure about them. Attempt grammar structures you've read about but never used in speaking. Experiment with idioms and expressions you've heard native speakers use. The beautiful thing about practicing alone is that nobody is judging your mistakes. You can try, fail, try again, and keep improving without any embarrassment. Use this freedom to be brave with your English. However, I do want to give you one important tip about mistakes. While you shouldn't worry about making them, you should notice them when you can. If you say something and you immediately realize it doesn't sound right, try saying it again. This self-correction is a really important skill that will help you in real conversations. Don't spend a lot of time analyzing why something was wrong, just try to say it better. For example, if you say, "I go to the store yesterday," you might immediately think, "That doesn't sound right." So you say, "I went to the store yesterday." You're training your ear to notice when something sounds off, and you're training your mouth to make quick corrections. Let's talk about pronunciation for a moment. Many English learners worry a lot about having perfect pronunciation. They think they need to sound exactly like a native speaker, or people won't understand them. This isn't true. There are many different accents in English, even among native speakers. Someone from Texas sounds different from someone from New York, who sounds different from someone from London or Australia. What matters most is being clear and understandable. Focus on pronouncing the sounds that are most important for meaning. For example, the difference between ship and sheep is important because these are different words with different meanings. But whether your R sound is exactly like an American R or has a slight accent from your native language is not as important. During your daily reading practice, pay attention to sounds that are difficult for speakers of your native language. If you're a Spanish speaker, you might focus on the difference between B and V sounds. If you're a Chinese speaker, you might work on L and R sounds. If you're an Arabic speaker, you might practice P and B sounds. But don't let pronunciation worries stop you from speaking. It's better to speak with an accent than not to speak at all. Confidence and fluency are much more important for communication than perfect pronunciation. Now, let's discuss how to track your progress. One of the challenges of language learning is that progress can feel invisible day by day. You might think you're not improving, when actually you're making great progress that's just hard to notice. Here are some ways to track your 30-minute daily practice. First, keep a simple log. Just write down what you practiced each day. Monday, read article about climate change, listened to podcast about renewable energy, talked about environmental issues in my country. This log will help you see your consistency and also help you notice patterns in your interests and vocabulary development. Second, once a week, try to have a longer speaking session where you talk about multiple topics for 15 or 20 minutes. Record this if possible. Notice how long you can speak before running out of things to say. Notice how comfortably you transition between topics. Notice whether you're using new vocabulary or grammar structures that you've been practicing. Third, pay attention to your English outside of practice time. Do you find yourself thinking in English more often? When you watch English movies or TV shows, do you understand more than you did a month ago? When you read English texts, do you need to look up fewer words? These are all signs that your daily practice is working. Many of my students are surprised by how much their passive understanding improves when they start this active practice routine. When you spend time every day actively producing English, your brain becomes more attuned to recognizing English patterns when you encounter them naturally. Let me give you some troubleshooting advice for common problems people have with this 30-minute method. Problem number 1, I start strong but then I lose motivation after a week or two. This is super common, so don't feel bad if this happens to you. The solution is to start smaller and build up gradually. If 30 minutes feels like too much at first, start with 15 minutes or even 10. The most important thing is to build the habit of daily practice. Once the habit is established, you can gradually increase the time. Also, make sure you're choosing materials and topics that genuinely interest you. If you're bored by what you're practicing with, you're much more likely to quit. Love cooking? Practice with cooking videos and food blogs. Interested in technology? Find tech podcasts and articles about new gadgets. The more personally interesting your practice materials are, the easier it will be to stick with the routine. Problem number 2. I feel like I'm not making progress. Remember that language learning progress isn't always linear. You might feel like you're improving quickly for a few weeks, then hit a plateau where it seems like nothing is changing. This is normal. Plateaus are actually a sign that your brain is consolidating what you've learned before moving to the next level. During these plateau periods, the most important thing is to keep practicing consistently. Don't give up or dramatically change what you're doing. Trust the process. Very often, after a plateau period, students experience a sudden jump in their abilities. It's like their brain was working behind the scenes to organize all the input they'd been giving it. Problem number 3, I feel silly talking to myself. I completely understand this feeling. It can feel strange to have conversations with yourself, especially if other people might hear you. Here are some strategies to make this more comfortable. First, remember that you're not the only one doing this. Millions of language learners around the world practice speaking to themselves. It's a completely normal and effective learning technique. Second, find a private space where you feel comfortable. This might be your bedroom, your car, or even outside while you're walking. Some of my students practice in the shower. The important thing is that you feel free to speak without worrying about being heard. Third, if speaking to yourself still feels too strange, try speaking to an imaginary friend or family member. Pretend you're calling your best friend to tell them about your day, or imagine you're explaining something to your grandmother. This can make the speaking practice feel more natural and purposeful. Problem number 4, I don't know what to talk about. This is another very common issue. Sometimes when it's time for speaking practice, your mind just goes blank. Here are some conversation starters that work for almost any level. Talk about your day. What did you do? What did you see? Who did you talk to? How did you feel about different parts of your day? Talk about your plans. What are you going to do tomorrow, this weekend, next month? What are you looking forward to? What are you worried about? Talk about comparisons. How is today different from yesterday? How is this year different from last year? How is your country different from other countries you know about? Talk about opinions. What do you think about something you read or heard recently? Do you agree or disagree with it? Why? Talk about memories. What did you do last weekend? What was your favorite meal recently? What's a happy memory from your childhood? Talk about descriptions. Describe your neighborhood, your family, your job, your hobbies, your favorite movie or book. The key is to start talking, even if you don't know where the conversation will go. Often, once you start talking about one thing, it will remind you of something else, and you'll naturally move from topic to topic. Let me share one more success story to inspire you. I worked with a young man named Ahmed who came to the United States for graduate school. His reading and writing skills in English were excellent, but he was terrified of participating in class discussions or even ordering food at restaurants. Ahmed was skeptical about spending only 30 minutes a day on speaking practice. He thought he needed to spend hours studying to make real progress, but he agreed to try the method for 1 month. In the first week, Ahmed mostly just read aloud and repeated sentences. His speaking practice was very basic, mostly describing objects in his apartment or talking about what he had for breakfast. By the second week, he started getting more comfortable with the rhythm of daily practice. He began listening to podcasts about his field of study and then explaining the concepts in his own words. In the third week, something clicked. Ahmed realized he could practice having the kinds of conversations he needed to have in graduate school. He started practicing explaining his research ideas, discussing academic papers, and even practicing small talk for social situations. After just 1 month, Ahmed's advisor commented on how much more confident and articulate he seemed in class. Ahmed told me later that the daily practice had made English feel less foreign to him. It wasn't just a subject he studied anymore, it was a tool he used to think and express himself. The key to Ahmed's success was consistency and relevance. He practiced every day, and he practiced the type of English he actually needed to use. This is crucial. Your 30-minute practice should prepare you for the real English situations in your life. Before we wrap up, let me give you some final tips for making your 30-minute daily practice as effective as possible. First, try to practice at the same time every day. This helps establish the habit and makes it easier to stick with the routine. Many people find that morning practice works best because their minds are fresh and they haven't yet gotten distracted by the demands of the day. Second, eliminate distractions during your practice time. Turn off your phone notifications, close unnecessary browser tabs, and let people know you need 30 minutes of uninterrupted time. Quality of practice is more important than quantity. Third, be patient with yourself. Some days your practice will feel great and you'll feel like you're making lots of progress. Other days might feel more difficult and you might feel like you're struggling. Both types of days are normal and important for learning. Fourth, celebrate small victories. Did you successfully explain a complex idea in English today? Did you remember to use a new word you learned last week? Did you speak for 10 minutes without stopping? These are all achievements worth acknowledging. Fifth, connect with other English learners if possible. While the 30-minute method is designed for solo practice, it can be really motivating to share your progress with others who understand the challenges you're facing. Look for online communities, language exchange partners, or local English learning groups. Finally, remember that fluency is not a destination. It's a journey. Even native speakers continue to learn new words, expressions, and ways of communicating throughout their lives. The goal isn't to reach some perfect level of English and then stop. The goal is to become comfortable using English as a tool for communication, learning, and self-expression. I want to leave you with this thought. 30 minutes a day might not seem like much, but over the course of a year, that's more than 180 hours of focused English practice. That's equivalent to several months of traditional classroom instruction, but it's specifically tailored to your needs and interests, and it's focused on the skills you actually need for real communication. The students who stick with this method consistently are always amazed by how much their confidence and fluency improve. They start to think of themselves not as English students, but as English users. And that shift in identity is one of the most powerful changes that can happen in your language learning journey. So, are you ready to commit to 30 minutes a day? Are you ready to stop just studying English and start actually using it? I believe you can do this. I've seen hundreds of students transform their English abilities with this approach. Your English fluency journey starts with a single day, a single 30-minute session. Why not make today that day? Remember, you don't need perfect conditions to start. You don't need expensive courses or special equipment. You just need 30 minutes, some English materials that interest you, and the courage to speak out loud. Your future fluent self is waiting for you to take this first step. Good luck, and I can't wait to hear about your progress.